Welcome, welcome, welcome all. Thanks so much for tuning in to the Inkwell Exchange. You are listening to a YouTube exclusive. I'm very excited. I will explain YouTube exclusive for those who are new here. That means you will see this full interview only on YouTube. You will see clips and all of those lovely things on Instagram and Facebook and all of those lovely places, but the full interview will live here alone. If you are new to the Inkwell Exchange, no worries. This is a platform I am building to show creatives, audiobook narrators like our guest today, authors, poets, speakers, all of those people who work with words, to tell us about their art, their content, the things they create, so that we can all learn from each other. So my goal is by the end of this, you will have learned something. And I am sure I'm about to learn a lot from our next guest, mostly because she is our first audiobook narrator to ever grace the mic on the Inkwell Exchange. So I am going to pass it over to her to tell us a little bit about herself. And then, as you know the drill, I'll take it from there.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Ellisa. My name is Raquel Beattie. I'm an audiobook narrator. I've narrated over 100 titles. I recently was the recipient of an Earphones Award by Audiophile Magazine. They review, yeah. It was an ensemble cast. It was so great to work with them. And I've had a few reviews from them too that have been really lovely. I'm married for almost 17 years, have 3 kids, and have always loved reading. And when this opportunity came up, it was just such a great fit. I'm really excited to be doing this and talking to you about it.
Of course, of course. And we are so glad to have you. And I think this is actually an awesome segue into my very, very first question, which is how did you decide to become an audiobook narrator? I know a lot of us kind of maybe read out loud. I feel like I was told to do it when I was a kid in the car, like to make sure that I was actually reading and not just like skimming over pages.
Mm-hmm.
But how did you decide to get into audiobook narration?
So I moved, well, myself and my family, we moved to a totally new state, knew nobody in the city. Um, and I already don't super love driving. So I was like, I need to find something to just get me out there. I know it takes time to get used to a new place, especially when I don't know anybody. And I saw in the mail there was a community, like adult community education mailer. And on there was one of the classes was make money with your voice. And I was intrigued because I was involved in performing arts in high school and college. And, you know, once you have babies, you kind of push other things to the side. But I was like, I would love to get into this. And this kind of marries both my love of performance and books. So I just went to the class. It kind of snowballed from there. Started learning about more forums online, started listening to a lot more audiobooks. And yeah, and just basically didn't know a lot about audiobooks myself, which was probably a good thing because you just kind of jump in. But yeah, started auditioning, and once you get that first audiobook out there and you record it, you just get bitten by the bug and you just keep going.
So how do you pick your projects, right? Like how do you kind of create your for you in particular, how did you create your niche and decide like, hey, I want to do these kinds of projects, but I have no interest in doing these?
So it's when you're auditioning, you get to decide what you audition for. So I would look for, especially for independent authors, I would look for authors that I really loved their work and maybe see if they had books in audio, reach out to them, or, on there's platforms that you can audition on, and ACX, if you want to go on there. And just find things. Like, for example, I just found one. I was just one day like, I'm curious what's on here. And I was like, oh, there's a Mexican protagonist. She is, dealing with dystopian San Antonio. That's where I live. I love the dystopian genre. Let's just try it out. And I'm really excited to work on that book.
Yeah.
Yeah, and with producers, a lot of, or with like publishing houses, I should say, um, I try to say yes as much as possible, because with them, they think about the narrators that are on their roster. They think about it, and I'm like, oh, they've thought of me for this book for a reason. So I'm gonna look into it. I'm gonna, um, you know, try my best on this audition and really go for it. And it's been a pleasant surprise in that I never really thought of myself as like a nonfiction person, but I've had some nonfiction books that were really fun and really cool. So that's another reason that I try to say yes, because it I'm able to like stretch my skills, learn new things, and also just learn really cool stuff, even from fiction books as well, you know. So I
So
don't know.
I
I try to be open.
Yeah, no, I think
Yeah.
that's a great point. I have probably two follow-up questions based on what you said,
Yeah.
which was one is being a person of diverse background like ourselves and a lot of our listeners actually, do you find that to be a help or a hindrance more in the audiobook industry, given that it's only voice? I think my
Mm-hmm.
instinct is that like, oh, there would be a lot greater opportunity because nobody can see you. It just matters what your
Right.
voice sounds like. But also I could see it being a hindrance too, right? If you're known for, a certain accent or whatever, and then
Mm-hmm.
they have a completely different vibe they're going for.
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, I don't feel like it's been a hindrance, just because I can speak Spanish. I can't, I don't speak Spanish. I think I speak more like Spanglish. Like I couldn't read a whole book in Spanish, but characters that speak, paragraphs in Spanish or whatever, I can do that. And so I feel like some books have come my way because of that. I can't really do like Australian accents, and that's okay. Like, but I've been able to start practicing and honing in like my British accents. So, like you said, because it's mostly just your voice, I can be like more British or even Southern, right? Or, so it is fun. It's a chance to, yeah, stretch those skills and use the ones that I've got, like Spanish speaking.
I love that. And then I
Mm-hmm.
guess my second question was really just a very fun one, which is kind of what is a line or like moment in a book that you recall that you were like, I had to practice that a bazillion times, but it was the best moment in the world when I got it.
Oh my gosh, this is hard because I'll tell you what, we kind of move fast in the audiobook world. You work on a book for a week or two, and then you got to move on to your next one. So I don't remember all the lines per se, but I know that there's been a couple times it seems like the easiest thing in the world to say, and I am messing up. Like for some reason, I just cannot get it to come out right. Or there's been a few times I know where there's a very like triumphant line, and I just have to pause after I say that because I've got the goosebumps. I've got like, it feels good. You feel that triumph with the character, and it's really fun. I've also had to pause a couple times. I really do like to do romance, but I gotta say, sometimes some of the lines on there, I'm like, it's so cheesy, it makes me laugh. But I'm like, my husband kind of picked me up with the cheesy lines, so I can't really say anything.
Right.
But
I
it's
love
it's
that.
fun.
How do you I guess this is also a process question, but how do you connect? You suggest like you find authors that you read or you enjoy their work, but how does the process, like once you've picked a book or they've chosen you, how does that process of working with authors work? Or do you work with authors very often at all?
Yes, yeah, especially independent authors who want a little bit more hands-on. Um, so I always, for any production, read the whole book entirely through, because sometimes at the very last chapter, it'll come out that this person who was introduced in chapter one actually has an accent or something. Or, so you got to read the whole thing. You got to get to know the characters. And I always let the author know where in the process I'm at. Hey, I just finished prepping. And then I'll record like a 15 to 25-minute sample and let them know, like, this is kind of, these are the character choices I'm making. Um, Sometimes I'll ask, or a lot of times I ask the author, who would you cast? Like if you were making a movie of this book, because it also helps me get into the mind of the author. Who were they picturing as they were creating these characters? And of course, ask pronunciations, all of that stuff. Go from there, record that sample, and then send it to them to listen. And then after that, they can tell me, yes, that's spot on. Or, I was actually thinking going more in this direction. And I'm like, yes, give me all the feedback. I want to get this, how I want to get this so you're happy with it. Um, and then once they say yes, green light, I record the whole book.
Wow.
So yeah,
Wow.
there's a lot of front end conversation. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So then I guess this also may be like an obvious question, but is there much of a difference between your process for like very creative I guess fiction to a very like straightforward, maybe nonfiction memoir vibe, right? Do the genres kind of change your process as an audiobook narrator?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I mean, I still will do all the reading, ask pronunciations and all that kind of thing. Um, it's Fiction is can be a little more fun, even the dark stuff, than the nonfiction, just my preference. Nonfiction can be pretty dense, but definitely each book has its tone. And as I'm reading, I look for that tone. What is the author trying to convey? What is like, and how and what way are they conveying this? Is this very serious? Is this more playful? I have had nonfictions that are more playful, and but always I'm imagining, a very intimate conversation. I'm in the person's ears. I'm in the person's car, and so I'm talking to my friend, I'm talking to someone who's right there with me. So no matter the tone, that's what I'm also keeping in mind, that I'm right there with the listener.
I love that. So, okay, my last process question, I
No,
promise.
yeah.
Is there do you tend to record? I've always thought like the switching between characters has to be hard, right? So do you record like all one character's lines at one time, and then is it like editing at the back end, or are you live in the booth like going between a female voice and a male voice and the narrator over the whole story?
So that's the really fun part, is you're just going back and forth. You're just talking. And I think for me anyways, I see it in my mind. I see the movie happening, or the characters. It's like I'm seeing the movie. And so it's, of course it takes practice, but after a while you're just like, yep, here we go. Here we go. And I do mark up my book, I do minimal markups. I don't like to have too much, you know, on my tablet, so it takes away from the text, but I do like to at least give me a little bit of note of who's going to speak next. And so, yeah, it's really fun.
That is amazing. I imagine it kind of like a actor's script, right? You got those
Yeah.
little, yeah, that's so fun. Okay, so then pivoting to a couple, I guess, more industry wide questions. So, as an audiobook narrator, how do you build community, right, with other people in your space? I know for indie authors or whatever, I feel like there are a bazillion and one places where you can just go and find a bunch of us, mostly because a lot of us are also readers, I think, which
Mm-hmm.
also tend to like kind of clickify.
Mm-hmm.
But when I was looking for audiobook narrators to like interview, I see that like Book Talk is more and more like taking them under their wing and being like, hey, like we love these types of narrators, especially Spicy Book Talk.
Oh,
We
yeah.
love yeah, we love a good voice. But how do you all as like a community find each other and create community?
That's a great question. I will admit right up front, I am one of the reasons I also got into this is because I'm a huge introvert. And I was like, oh, I could just be alone in my booth and just play. That sounds great. um, but I have met a lot of great narrators. There's been a lot of great interactions. And I mean, part of it is there's conferences. You go to conferences. There also there is a vibrant online community, always talking to each other, either on Facebook, Instagram. One thing I absolutely love about this community is that for the most part, we are so supportive of each other. Everyone, there's enough stories to go around, and we are just so happy when we see fellow narrators like excited about a project, or they get to work with the author of their dreams. It's such a supportive and just fun community. So I am friends, or like I have a small little but as a whole, there's a lot of opportunities to chat with other narrators, to meet up. Um, there's a very small group of narrators here in San Antonio, and we've had the privilege of meeting up and even doing a panel together. It was really fun. Mm-hmm.
That's amazing, because I think all of probably a lot of the clips I see of like audiobook narrators, there's a lot of introverts, but also just like the because you do kind of the producing and editing afterwards, there's a lot of opportunity for people to not have to be in the same room to record
Mm-hmm.
and be across the country or have never met each other at all, right? It's kind of like animated movies, I guess, very
Yeah.
similar, right? Where I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it could be months apart where you record your parts. So that's
Yep.
really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I think probably one of my last ish questions is how, if somebody is interested in like trying to start being a audiobook narrator or go into voice acting, one, what would be your words of advice to them as far as like the pros and cons, and understand whether or not this is something that you would be even interested in getting into?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of pros. I would say if you want to get into it, do it. Like I said earlier, ACX is a place where you can just audition for books. I did get started on just straight royalty share. I don't do that anymore since I've been in this game for many years now. But when I first started, I was like, all right, let's just do royalty share. We'll see, and even with my performance experience, I would still say get a coach. I've had many coaches, and I still am like, who am I going to coach with, on different aspects that now I'm like, oh, I want to learn more of this. It's always, as long as you're curious, right? Just you have a open mind, kind of a learning mind. Um, because, that helps you in this journey. What else? Yeah, I would say do research. There's places online, like I said, groups on Facebook. You can just join, ACX narrators, and learn from the veterans there. I learned a ton by just like, I had questions and I'd put it in the chat, and tons of stuff would come up. Just go for it, man.
Yeah, I love that. So, but since you've been in the game a little bit, would you, I guess, would you recommend or would you suggest that newbies create a niche for themselves, or is it more create? So, for instance, like if you're an author, right? Most people pick a genre and they pretty usually kind of stick to it, right? Like you do, say, like I write children's books and poetry, right? Like you're
Mhm.
hardly ever going to see probably anything too far from that. Maybe short stories, right?
Mhm.
Um, Same with like a lot of our romance authors, right? They tend to, even within romance, right? A lot of them stick to like contemporary, and that's what they
Yeah.
do, or
Mhm.
sports, and that's what they do.
Mhm.
Is it similar with being an audiobook narrator? Do you benefit from kind of that niche branding? Or is it better to just kind of make yourself available, kind of that quantity game?
Mhm. I guess it depends on what you want to work on. I work on a ton of stuff. I've decided I don't want to just be one thing where I know I could be. Like, I know I could brand myself. Um, but I also know people who just do like romance, and they'll sometimes do other stuff. And they've made a big name for themselves in that genre. So that can help, to just be in that one space. Um, I don't know. I come at it as I am having a great time. And so I like to read all sorts of books. But yeah, I think it just depends what you want to focus on. Um, and again, because yeah, branding is a big thing. Oh man, I'm so bad at the whole branding social media thing. So I don't have like the best advice there for you. Probably talk to a branding person. But I think it could work either way, any way that you want to. I would say the biggest thing, because you are marketing yourself to mostly like authors and publishing houses, is to just be very professional. Get back to people, do the work you say you're going to do, and that actually will help a lot, whatever way you choose to. You know.
Yeah, you've mentioned that. I did say this was going to be our last dish question, but I have a
Oh
follow
no, 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 it's fine.
up. So you mentioned working with publishing houses and authors. What would you
Mhm.
say is like the biggest difference between the two, as far as whether it be process, like the
Mhm.
desire, the needs, how they work? Are there any tips for kind of managing those differences?
Yeah. So when you work with an independent author, you do everything. So I have to find the professional audio engineer, and I've worked with a couple. I have good relationships with some who's going to because I will sometimes like do misreads. I'll think it says something, because you're just going through, you're in the game, and then turns out, oh, you misspoke that word. And so they're the ones who find those kind of misspeaks, maybe a mispronunciation. And then once you get all the corrections, they get everything retail ready so that it's ready for Audible, iTunes, all of that. So I can focus on the performance. Um, so I'm in charge of doing that. I'm in charge of paying the audio or the engineer, and invoicing and all of that. When you go through a production house, um, you just perform and that's it. They're the ones who give you the resources. Of course, you ask them like, "Oh, I have a question about this. If you could ask the author." They're like the middleman, but they have everything in house. So.
Got it.
Mhm.
No, that is very interesting. So do usually when you're going into a conversation with the publishing house, I'm guessing they have more of, as far as like details and ideas on like how they want this particular thing done, given that
Mhm.
they're probably doing, it's probably in the scope of like a bigger project. Whereas with an author, I'm guessing you have to draw a little bit more of that out.
Kind of.
Okay.
So, like, since with the authors, if I'm working directly with the author, yeah, those conversations can happen and I can build that relationship with the author. With the publishing house, a lot of times they're like, you're the professional, so you do the performance,
Wow.
they're a little more hands off. Of course, I can always ask whatever questions. They're so great at answering all my questions, and I still get, information. But I will say that a lot of the books I've worked with, the writing has been so great. I can get a lot of information from the text. Um, so, yeah, it is a little more hands off when it's with a production house. But again, I've worked with several and they're all so great. They will answer any questions. and let me know too, hey, the author has kind of said they want this. Great. I love the feedback. I love all of that. And when I'm working just independently with an author, I just get to ask that and kind of build that relationship there. So
That's
there's
fun.
pros and cons to both. Yeah.
That's really helpful. So,
Yeah.
okay, this I promise is
Yeah.
the last one. What would you say is one thing, or like one thing that a author working with an author they have done that has just made your life as a performer of their audiobook easier, whether it be, a type of blurb, a specific format, a particular type of note, or even like within the text, right? Is it certain descriptors that just make it easier as an audiobook narrator to kind of deliver kind of that spot on product?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of times in the text, I love the show, don't tell, so you really get that feel. Of course, if they're said with the silky smooth voice, then I'm like, okay, I know I have some examples of what this sounds like. So yeah, that's also helpful. Just a tiny descriptor. Oh, a husky voice. Okay, yeah, I know what to work with here. And like I said, also sometimes it's just fun to be like, who were you imagining? Who would you cast? It's just kind of a fun extra thing to help me. But tell me the question again. I was
Like
going
what is something that, like, when you're working with an author that they've
oh, that makes
done, that just made your life 100 times easier, even if it's something like you
yes.
adopted and you were like, after that I always ask my authors this question.
Yeah, I will say it's communication. Like they don't have to get back to me the day of, but because of how scheduling works, I love it. And I'm so grateful to my authors that I work with that are pretty much like, hey, I can't answer this right now, but I'll get back to you tomorrow. Or will just get back to me with everything I need the next day or two or whatever. And it's really great that you build this trust. I know that you've given me this book. I'm really putting my heart into it, and now you're helping me with that. So we can together make this product that we're both happy with. And I will say too, it's really nice when authors give feedback. I know maybe it will be awkward, like at the beginning, but I'm like, no, 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 that's what this like whole front work is for. So we can, um, I love to talk and communicate and discuss these things so that I can get it right. Um, but yeah, and just authors are great. I've gotten such great feedback. It's so fun to develop these, relationships, and yeah, it's just a lot of good times.
I think that's awesome. So I will wrap us up with the last question that we always ask all of our guests, which is,
Mhm.
how can we as a community support your work?
Oh, I guess just listen to audiobooks. I am on Audible, Spotify, iTunes. Raquel Beattie. I'm on Instagram. Again, this next year, I always have a word of the year. This next year is relationships. I'm going to really try to be on social media a little more just because I know it's part of the game nowadays. So, yeah.
I love that. And so I will also tell our audience so they should go follow you. And also touch base here with the Inkwell Exchange. You can find us at Miss Civics and like with an N coffee. And on Instagram. And then you can just kind of look up my name on Google if you're looking for like more stuff around me or anything like that. I am so glad to have you here. Thank you so much for joining me, Raquel. I'm going
Thank
to,
you for having me.
of course, it's been a joy. Always welcome to come back. Let me know if you have something that's just burning in your heart. But I want to thank everyone for viewing. And I will see you all. Make sure you check out IG for the dates for the next Inkwell Exchange live. All right. Have a great day. Bye, all.